We have problem 51. So important to note, it's using this information for questions 50 through 52, which includes 51. So we have Marcia who's making picture frames in two sizes, large and small. We have small frames here on our x-axis. In this case, they're calling that variable s. So it's technically the s-axis, but x-axis, horizontal. That's the number of small frames. And on our vertical axis, which they call L, or the y-axis, that's gonna be the number of large frames that she's making. We know it takes her 2 hours for a small frame, so small frames, 2 hours to make, and it takes 3 hours to make a large frame. Probably important for later. We know that the shaded triangular region, so right here, that's going to represent a system of equations, of inequalities, representing the amount that she can make in total. So it's talking about the weekly constraints Marcia has in making the frame. So for example, Marcia cannot make less than 2 frames, right? Because that region isn't shaded. All below where L equals 2, it's not possible because it's not shaded. So for making and selling S frames and L large frames, we have an equation that represents the amount of dollars in profit that Marcia will make. So not her gross earnings, just her profit. All right. So that's important because the question asks about profit. That's what we're going to use. We're going to use this equation here, 30S. These are variables S and L, S for small, L for large. We have 30S plus 70L. We'll have that be our L. So you can tell the difference from a 1. Always good to have a little loop there for the lowercase l, because the L and the 1 look pretty similar, right? So I like to put a loop in my L. And we know that's going to equal the profit for Marcia. So we're going to say equals P, which is our profit. So then she sells all the frames she makes. She has no inventory left over, which is important. So now for the actual question, it says for every hour that Marcia spends making frames in the second week of December, she donates $3. So for every hour she spends making the frame, she donates $3. So for 1 hour, it's $3. It's a unit rate of 1. This year, 1 hour, that is. This year, Marcia makes 4 large frames and 2 small frames in that week. Which of the following is closest to the percent of that week's profit she donated to the charity? So we know she made 4 large frames, 4L, and we know she also had 2 small frames, so 2S. So if we put that in an equation, we can find the number of dollars that she made, which is her profit, which we'll need. So we have 30S plus 40L, or plus 70L equals P. So we know our P is going to equal 30 times our S, which is 2, plus 70, just direct substitution here, 70 times our L, which is 4. And then we can simplify that. 30 times 2 is 60, plus 7 times 4 is 280, which is going to equal 60 plus 280, which is 340. So our profit is 340. But we don't see it's not an answer, so we have to make sure that we know what the question's actually asking. It's asking which of the following is closest to the percent of that week's profit that Marcia donated to the charity. Remember, her profit is the total, or what we're trying to find here is the percentage of the profit that she's donating to charity. We know she's donating $3 for every hour. That's the earlier part, $3 for every hour. So we want to find out how long she's working on them. We know it takes 2 hours for small frame and 3 hours for large frame. So we need another equation. We need 2 hours. This is the total time T takes for her to make all of this stuff, is 2 hours for our small frames. So for every small frame it takes 2 hours, we'll do 2 times our S, which is 2. This is the hours. This is the S value, even though they're both 2. Keep that in mind, because then for L, they're different. We have a large frame takes 3 hours to make. And our L value, the number of frames, or this is number of frames here, is going to be 4. So we have 3 hours times 4 frames, because it takes 3 hours to make each frame. We're also assuming that Marcia can't work on multiple frames at once for this problem. So then 2 times 2 is 4. We're just simplifying here. Then plus 3 times 4 is 12. So our total time is going to equal 16. And then we know that she spends $3, or she donates $3 to charity for each hour that she works. So if she works 16 hours, then 16 times 3 is going to equal the total number that she donates. Which equals 16 times 3, and we know that that's 48. Use your calculators for that if you need to, because it's the calculator portion of the ACT. So it's going to be $48, use our units. So then the percentage is $48 that she's donating, and it's of the profit in total. So we know our profit in total is 340. So in order to find our percentage, we do 48 divided by 340, and that's going to give us a decimal value. And that's okay, because we know how to convert our decimals to percentages. We're going to use our calculator for this because that fraction is kind of hard to simplify in our heads. So 48 divided by 340. And again, you can use a calculator, so you might as well, on the ACT, fly through the questions with the calculations. It's probably a good idea to have your calculations in the calculator because you don't need to show work for credit, right? So if you know how to do this, if you understand this process of setting up your equations, solving for the variables, doing an equation like this on the calculator in total, like 2 times 2, and then adding 3 times 4 and setting it up that way will save you time. And that means you have more time for those harder problems. And then being efficient with your time is going to reward you in your score because you can spend more time on those harder problems. And sometimes people don't even get to the problems at the back. So making sure you're getting to all the problems is important. So speed might be a factor. Use your calculators as best and as much as you possibly can, especially for calculations like this, 48 divided by 340, because that's almost impossible to do in our heads. So you get an answer of 0.1411, yada, 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 a bunch of decimals. So then we can round that off to 2 decimal places because we're working with percentages. So it roughly equals 0.14 because the 1 is less than 5, so we round down. And then 0.14, remember, if we have a decimal and want to represent it as a percentage, we just multiply the whole thing by 100, which we can do by moving the decimal place 2 over to the right. So it's going to equal 14%. 0.14 does not equal 14, but 0.14 does equal 14%. We see that as our answer of C.